Jumpin In on Manx Radio.
With Howard and Chris Kane.
Hello.
Good evening.
And welcome. Yes, I know. Spring is in the air, almost one way or another. Whichever way you look at it, it is Saturday, it is 9 o'clock, and that means, of course, yes, all together now, the best in modern and contemporary jazz in Jumpin' In with myself, H.
And me, Chris. Yes, welcome along to this week's show. And we do seem to be having a bit of a spring break, at least as far as the weather is concerned. So make the most of the weekend, because perhaps summer isn't quite here yet, as suggestions are that winter may be hiding a little bit around the corner. But speaking of spring break, before you're overrun with partying American fresh men and women, what have you been throwing on the turntable this week, H, or has it just been some old bangers on the barbie?
I was going to have a winter barbecue, funnily enough. An old friend of the show, we haven't heard him for a long time, he's stateside these days, Jean-Michel Pilk. With his trio. The sad loss recently, just heard in the last week or two, of the wonderful, eccentric but brilliant Jessica Williams, reflecting on her, and the Portico Quartet still going.
And for me, well, some sky fruit, some dried drupes, and an act of worship. And to get things going, here's Remy Le Boeuf's Assembly of Shadows with Sibian from his latest release, Architecture of Storms. Remy Le Boeuf and his Assembly of Shadows big band, following on from the band's self-titled debut back in 2019, which I have to say, I played almost constantly for a month in the car when it was released. This second release is also a suite, this time called The Architecture of Storms. I did play a track a few months ago when it was in pre-release, but now it's available in all its glory, and the track we just heard was entitled Sibian, written back in 2017, dedicated to his siblings. The piece was commissioned for the New York Youth Symphony. A great band this, many top soloists including Dinah Stevens on sax as well as Remy himself of course, Philip Dijak on trumpet and many others, and the soloists we heard there were Matt Holman on the trumpet and Martha Cato on piano.
Terrific stuff, lovely way to get going with a big band, as is traditional on this programme, it has to be said. The home of the modern jazz big band. From big to small, to one of our favourite formats, the piano trio, and again a great exponent, little heard on this side of the pond these days, Jean-Michel Pilk. We did interview him many years ago when he was based around London and France. So after that he went out to New York. I think he's now resident, if memory serves correct, in Canada. I just thought of him the other day. I was watching something, I think on YouTube, and Ari Honig's band came up, who's his regular drummer, an amazingly fluid and inventive drummer, unique and identifiable quite often by his almost
melodic
unique, his melodic use of the drums, and so he'll often in his solos and in the band play the theme, the melody, actually on the tom-toms and the snare, using his hands and his elbows to actually alter the tension on the skins. Anyway, I just thought we haven't heard from either Ari or Jean-Michel for a while. Here's an album called Freedom. It also features Francois Mouton on the bass, from Mouton Brothers fame of course, and this is their take on Miles's Nardis. left hanging in the air. Nardus, as brought to you by Jean-Michel Pilk and his trio on an album called Freedom. Jean-Michel Pilk, piano, Francois Mouton from the Mouton Brothers Reunion, wonderful stuff. Ari Hoenig, again, great player, has several bands out, or at least he plays in several bands and has a band of his own name, which we featured several times on the programme. We did speak to Jean-Michel years and years ago in Pizza Express when he was played a lot in London. I think he was based in Paris. I was right, just having a look as we were listening. He is actually now, and has been for a while, at Montreal in Canada. And in fact, I've almost been to exactly where he was. He's teaching at McGill University and playing as well. Jim Doxus, the drummer, I bumped into him there. He is a teacher at the same at university and has several albums out. A great drummer, really imaginative, and a lovely guy. He was playing there with his trio when I went to a jazz club whose name eludes me when we were in Montreal several years ago. Seemed to have quite a nice active scene. Lovely sound. I always liked sort of Jean-Michel Pilk. It's a shame we don't see him this side of the pond very often, but nice to have him on the show again.
And yes, we've got many early releases from him, which are worth digging in if you're not familiar with his work. And now, speaking of piano trios, you could also say the home of new piano trios here on Jumpin In. Next, a young rising piano star from Sweden. Joel Lissarides is just 30, and his latest release, Stay Now, on Act Records, is one of the most played jazz trios in Europe on Spotify, with over 50 million plays. So even a penny a go, he's obviously doing something right. Here's Cloudberry. definitely in the one-to-watch category. That's Joe Lissarides, apologies if I pronounced his name wrong, and his trio, Nicholas Fernquist on the bass, Rasmus Blixt at the drums, and Joel at the piano. He's equally at home, apparently, in many genres, playing and collaborating with jazz, classical blues and pop artists, including Niels Landgren, Victoria Tolstoy, and the famous YouTuber Dirty Loops. And by the age of 26, he'd already acquired 20 major national and international jazz awards. He composes the tunes on Stay Now whilst staying in a remote cottage deep in the forest, about half an hour outside of Stockholm, and mainly during the peace of the night. He says it is in the most intimate, quiet, focused and concentrated moments that the most spectacular things happen. And he also says he can't explain his popularity except that he likes to write tunes that people like. And I think there's an element of EST for sure there, and I think, harking back a bit further to folk traditions, an element of jazz par svenska, which was cited obviously by Esbjørn Svensson as one of his great inspirations when he started out. It's available now on ACT, and thanks to them for sending us that.
Good stuff, as you say. Definitely a hint of EST there. I suppose it's difficult to be in a piano trio format not have a little hint of EST, but frankly, none the worse for that.
Hi, this is Maria Schneider, and you're listening to Jumpin' In with H and Chris on Manx Radio.
Captured Time from a new EP by the Portico Quartet. Yeah, I didn't know they were still around. Jack Wiley's still playing sax, I think, on that. And yes, we remember them way back. We always claim a little bit in their possible fame, and that we first saw them busking on the South Bank when we were at the London Jazz Festival, had a chat with them, and they didn't even know the festival was on. And then Ollie from...
I gave a record to him. We bought a record from them and gave it to Ollie from Babel, who picked them up.
Records, and they went from there. They then sort of, the hung was their thing, the wonderful hung, that hand-played steel drum, as it were, which I have on myself, in fact. But then they sort of binned that off for a while because they felt it was restricting them too much. It appears to be back in that one, in Captured Time, certainly sampled at the very least, if not played. On the notes, it's they could write notes for a modern art exhibition on this one. Captured Time, the track we just heard, a melodious and atmospheric tune that erupts out of layered synthesizers and strings. Its contrast between melodic simplicity and textural density is what lets it push through to an elated, ecstatic conclusion as the band draw you into an emotional journey as only they can. Now, I don't know if that worked for you or not. Actually, I rather liked it. Whether I went as far as an emotional journey, I don't know. It reminded me a little bit, actually, bizarrely, of some of the incidental music for the very early Morse with Barrington Fellung used to do. Nonetheless, I quite enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the EP. It'd be nice to see them again.
And Oliver Winding, if you keep up with him, besides Babel, has for quite a while been the owner and operator of the Vortex Club.
Yeah.
Now, for those of you who take notes and thinking back to the Jazz in 3 days, every record discussed used to have the full catalogue number read out as part of as well as the lineup. But you'll recall a new release from drummer Jared Schoening called Two Takes, which I played at the beginning of last month. Now, although it was his debut, it was a very brave double album with all his original compositions, but in two settings. First volume with his quintet, and the second volume, all the same pieces, arranged by an A-list of invited composers and arrangers for big band. Well, we heard the big band then, so now let's hear the quintet with Nuts. Nuts taken from Jared Schoenig's quintet release, Two Takes, Volume 1. The albums are available either separately or together, and I think actually it's worth going the extra mile to get both, although I did it one at a time. I could have saved money, couldn't I? But they're a good mix of hard bop swingers, ballads and funky numbers, and the fresh takes by the big band guest arrangers breathe new life into all of Jared's compositions. The quintet you heard there, Marcus Hill on trumpet, Godwin Lewis on alto, Louis Perdermo on piano, who we featured recently on his own album, and also on Rhodes, Matt Closey on the bass, and composer and drummer Jared Schoening. Well worth digging out.
You are listening to Jumpin' In with Chris and myself, H. Best in modern and contemporary jazz here on Manx Radio, where you'll find us every Saturday night at 9 o'clock. And don't forget to check out the podcast, of course, so you can take us anywhere you want, anytime you want, on any device you want, realistically. We are very sorry to hear of the death of Jessica Williams. Wonderful pianist, died a little bit earlier this month. She suffered with health problems for quite some time and was tragically young again, just I think short of her 74th birthday. Hadn't been playing for some time due to health problems which had plagued her career off and on. Started out in the 70s playing with the likes of Philly Joe Jones and Lex Humphreys in Philadelphia before she moved to New York and then to the West Coast, and has played with the likes of Eddie Harris, Tony Williams, Stan Getz, Bobby Hutcherson, Charlie Hayden. You get the gist. She was way up there and more than capable of holding her own in any company. Towards the end of the 90s, she established her own record label, Red and Blue Recordings, and also started her own publishing company, JJW Music, and an internet mail order business, which I did use. And she'd sort of burned the CDs herself and then signed them for you. So I've got one, so saying 2H, love, JW. I have to say the first track is corrupted on it, which might be my machine, I don't know. But a great loss, a wonderful talent, albeit she was perhaps an eccentric lady or whatever. We've got to have a tribute in any case. Here's one I've always really loved ever since the first time I heard it, I think on Jazz Record Requests. It could be about my other half. Sue's Blues.
Hi, this is Dave Holland. I just want to let you know you're listening to Manx Radio. The show is Jumping In with Chris and H. Hope you enjoy it. Keep listening.
Think you can lick it? Get to the wicket. Buy you a ticket. Go! By bus, by plane, by car, by train. New York, New York. What they call a something else town. A city of more than 8 million people with 1 million people passing through every day. Some come just to visit, and some come to stay. Think you can lick it? Get to the wicket. Buy you a ticket. Go!
love the way Max Roach echoes the melody on the cymbals there. George Russell and his orchestra, New York, New York, one of those sort of unsung masterpieces of Russell's. It doesn't get the airing it really ought to. Anyone was on that at the time. John Coltrane is in there, Benny Golson, Art Farmer, Bill Evans, Bob Brookmeyer, Phil Woods, Hal McCusick, Milt Hinton, Max Roach, John Hendricks doing the narration there, George Russell directing and arranging all the music. New York, New York, it's called, recorded back in the magic years of 58, 59, when there was magic in the air in the jazz world. Before that, Sue's Blues from the sadly now late Jessica Williams. She will be missed, but lots of her music to enjoy.
Yes, fantastic stuff indeed. Well, that's about it for this week's show. But before we go, we just got time for a track from the London free improvising trio Ill Considered. Now, having released a staggering 9 albums between 2017 and 2019, the band led by saxman Idris Rahman, brother of pianist Zoe, and both of them actually played here on the island a few years ago at the Air and Arts Festival. Bassist Liran Donan, who's fantastic, 1,000 Boats, we've featured on the show as well, and drummer Emre Ramazanoglu. These albums have all been live recordings, so has the new studio release, Liminal Space, lost any of the energy and intensity of the gigs, or indeed lost the raw feel by adding multiple guests? Well, I don't think so, but see what you think. Here's Prayer. See you next week.
Look after yourselves, enjoy the sun.
Bye for now.